start with developments in Iran tonight. 2 bomb blasts, more than 80 people dead, charges flying thick and fast, tensions escalating. Iran blames Israel, America blames ISIS. The attacks happened at the grave of Qasem Soleimani. He died some 4 years ago. How is he still influencing regional politics? What makes him a cult figure? Meanwhile, Israel has a hit list of top Hamas leaders. We'll tell you who's on it. And why South Africa, of all countries, has sued Israel for genocide. What difference will it make? Also in focus, can TikTok beat Amazon in the e-commerce space? It has set itself a big target for this year. Which names feature in the Epstein files? Why is it such a big scandal? How Taiwan is heading to polls under the shadow of Chinese balloons? What's up with the crypto market? We've seen the first crash of this year. Is the future of travel visa-free? And the story of the boy who beat Tetris. You don't want to miss this. The headlines first. China and the US hold rival drills in the disputed South China Sea. It comes amid a tense standoff between Beijing and Manila. The US is holding this 2-day exercise with the Philippines. Beijing claims almost the entire South China Sea. Sorry. Tensions also spreading in West Asia. Pro-Iran group in Baghdad claims a US drone strike killed their commander. Last month, Washington carried out retaliatory airstrikes in Iraq. The US says there have been over 100 attacks against its targets in Iraq and Syria since October. Russia and Ukraine exchanged more than 500 prisoners, the largest prisoner swap since the war began in 2022. The exchange was mediated by the UAE. It comes amid massive airstrikes by Moscow on Ukrainian cities. Sierra Leone charges its former president Ernest Bai Koroma with treason. He's accused of plotting a failed military coup in November. Koroma, who was granted bail, faces life imprisonment if convicted. Extreme cold and snowstorms disrupt travel and schools in Scandinavia. Temperatures drop to minus 40 degrees Celsius in the Nordic region. Sweden faces its coldest January in 25 years. And India beat South Africa in the shortest test match in history. The Cape Town test lasted only 107 overs. India won the match on the second day, levelling the series. A war in Gaza, attacks on ships in the Red Sea, and now bombings in Iran. It's raining crises in West Asia. Iran says it has suffered a terrorist attack. There were 2 explosions near the grave of Qasem Soleimani, the revered Iranian general, one of the most powerful figures in recent Iranian history. Yesterday was his 4th death anniversary, so large crowds gathered in Kerman, a city in southeastern Iran, about 800 kilometers away from Tehran. Kerman is the hometown of Qasem Soleimani. There was a procession there on his death anniversary, and that's when the bombs went off. We would like to advise viewer discretion. The pictures are disturbing. The first explosion, which is 700 meters from Soleimani's grave, apparently the bomb was placed in a car. It detonated remotely. The second bomb was kept about a kilometer away. It blew up 15 minutes after the first one, and this is the one that caused the maximum damage. The second one, scores of people are dead, and these numbers are expected to rise. The United Nations has condemned these attacks. So have the leaders of the United States, the European Union, Russia, China, India, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan. They've all condemned it. And one thing is amply clear. This was a well-planned, well-coordinated attack. The attackers wanted to cause maximum damage, both in terms of human life and to the Iranian regime. But who was behind the attacks? Tehran is pointing fingers at Israel. The Iranian government has issued an ultimatum.
I warn the Zionist regime, don't doubt it. You will pay the price for this crime. These crimes that you have committed, you will deeply regret.
This is Iran's deadliest terror attack since the Islamic Revolution. Iran is blaming the United States too. They haven't provided any evidence though, and no group has claimed responsibility. Washington has called Tehran's claims ridiculous.
The United States was not involved in any way, and any suggestion to the contrary is ridiculous. And number two, we have no reason to believe that Israel was involved in this explosion.
The Americans have their own theory. They believe it could be ISIS. The Islamic State could be behind this attack. That's what they say. And what's the basis of this claim? First of all, this attack has all the hallmarks of ISIS. The group is known for large-scale bombings. And second, ISIS terrorists have targeted Iran in the past. But like I said, this is just a theory. We're yet to see proof. And Iran remains unconvinced. It says it is being punished for its stand against Israel. Now, as you would know, Iran and Israel are arch enemies. Iran has vowed to erase Israel from the map of the world. Iran also supports Hamas, the group that controls Gaza, the one that carried out the terrorist attack in October. Now, Israel is waging a war on Gaza. The goal is to dismantle Hamas, to eliminate its leaders for the October 7th terrorist attack. Just this week, Israel conducted an operation. They sent a drone to Beirut in Lebanon. The Israelis sent this drone to Beirut. It struck an apartment building and killed a senior Hamas leader. His name was Saleh al-Aruri. He was the middleman between Iran and Hamas. He was their link. He had close ties with Tehran and deep connections with the Iranian regime. So the killing of this Hamas leader, of course, was a blow to Hamas. It was also a setback to Iran. The war in Gaza has heightened tensions in the region. So far, Iran has been cautious. It has not gotten involved directly. It's been targeting Israel through its proxies. Proxies like Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the Houthis in Yemen. They've opened multiple fronts against Israel. Hezbollah and Israel exchange fire on a daily basis. They're fighting on the Israel-Lebanese border. And recently, Hezbollah also held a rally and sent this message to Israel.
If the enemy thinks of waging a war on Lebanon, we will fight with restraint, without rules, without limits, and without restrictions. They know what I mean.
That's the message from the Hezbollah chief. Last night, there was a fresh round of attacks. Israel conducted shelling operations. Reports say 14 people were killed. 4 Hezbollah fighters were among them. What about the Houthis? They're in Yemen. They're targeting ships in the Red Sea and disrupting international shipping. So far, Iran has maintained a distance from its proxies. But will these bombings change that? Will Iran get involved directly? It's a possibility. Tehran is weighing its options. The president was supposed to travel to Turkey. He has cancelled that trip. Consultations are underway and the risk of a wider regional conflict is high again. We do hope better sense prevails. And these events were triggered by 2 blasts at the grave of Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general. He died in 2020. So much has happened since then. 2 wars, 1 pandemic, and a change of guard in Tehran in the last 4 years. Yet, he commands a lot of respect. Qasem Soleimani is borderline mythical in Iran. The question is how? Let's take a closer look at his life. Who was this man? Soleimani was born in 1955, so much before the Iranian Revolution. He was raised by a family of farmers. Before the revolution, he worked as a construction worker. But in 1980, he joined the Revolutionary Guards Corps, a militia formed by Ayatollah Khomeini. Soleimani's big test was the Iraq War. It broke out in 1980 and lasted until 1988, 8 years. And that's where he made his name. After the war, Qasem Soleimani was counted among Iran's top 10 commanders. He was deployed along the Iraq border. Then in 1998, he got a new task. Soleimani was asked to lead the Quds Force. Now, the Quds Force is part of Iran's Revolutionary Guard. It's one of the 5 branches. And their focus is on operations outside Iran, like helping proxy groups in other countries, plotting targeted strikes, or spying abroad. That's where Soleimani excelled. He turned the Quds Force into an elite clandestine agency. And in the process, he built a network of Shia militias across West Asia. And his character helped him. You see, Qasem Soleimani was not like most generals. He was soft-spoken, unassuming. No outbursts, no radical statements. He stayed in the shadows. And Iran's supreme leader liked that. He called him a living martyr. So with the Ayatollah's support, he began his job, first in Iraq. The Americans occupied Iraq in 2003. Soleimani supported the insurgency. He gave roadside bombs to Shia fighters. He bled the US Army one attack at a time. The Pentagon says Soleimani killed hundreds of soldiers and wounded thousands more. It tells you why the Iranians loved him. He was taking out the so-called Great Satan. Then came the Arab Spring. More opportunities for Qasem Soleimani. He saw that Bashar al-Assad's Syrian regime was in trouble, so he sent Shia militias to support him. Some were from Iran. Others were refugees from Afghanistan. Together they became the Fatemiyun Brigade, an Iranian proxy in Syria. Then you have Hezbollah. Their ties to Iran predate Soleimani's rise, but he cemented those ties. Experts say Hezbollah now takes orders directly from Tehran, almost like an extended arm. Same with Yemen's Houthis. When Soleimani was killed, Houthis wanted swift revenge. They called for strikes on US bases. These same groups are now continuing the fight. Hezbollah is shelling Israel. Houthis are attacking ships. Iraqi militias are firing drones at US assets. All of this was built by Qasem Soleimani. He armed, funded and organized these groups. He made them directly answerable to Tehran, and his fighters loved him. Soleimani was a soldier's general, meaning he liked to be on the ground. During the US occupation, he would slip into Iraq. During the Israel-Lebanon war, he was in Beirut, and later during the war against ISIS, he was in Baghdad again. Reporters would often spot him in pickup trucks or command posts, and his fighters respected that. When he died, millions of people hit the streets. There were rallies in Yemen, Lebanon, Syria and Pakistan. And of course, the biggest were in Iran. There was genuine grief in the country because he gave Iran its most potent weapon, its proxies. And as the West calls it, the axis of evil, that's how the West sees it. It gives Iran an asymmetric advantage. Just look at the Red Sea. If Iran was directly attacking ships, they would be in trouble. There would be counterattacks. So what does Iran do? They nudge the Houthis on. These proxies can do what Iran cannot, and that's why Soleimani looms large over West Asian politics. Of course, all of this is from Iran's perspective. Looking from the West, Soleimani was a terrorist.
The United States military successfully executed a flawless precision strike that killed the #1 terrorist anywhere in the world, Qasem Soleimani. Soleimani was plotting imminent and sinister attacks on American diplomats and military personnel, but we caught him in the act and terminated him.
#1 terrorist, he says. That's what former US President Donald Trump called him. It was Trump who ordered his assassination. A US drone took him out in Iraq. But in Iran, Qasem Soleimani is a hero. The man who extended Iran's influence across West Asia. Many say he could have been president one day. But would Soleimani, the politician, be as fondly remembered? It's a tricky question because the US assassination added to his legend. He became a martyr, killed by enemy #1. Maybe that made him more popular. The fact is, we can't be sure. But there is no denying Soleimani's imprint on West Asia, for good or for bad. Only time will tell. Where do you settle geopolitical battles? One can think of many places, maybe a diplomatic summit or a high-stakes phone call or sometimes an actual battlefield. But what about a courthouse? That's what South Africa is doing. They have filed a lawsuit against Israel. Let's answer some quick questions first. Where has this case been filed? At the ICJ, the International Court of Justice. It's like the United Nations Court. What does the lawsuit say? That Israel is committing genocide against Palestinians. That is the case. Is there a law about that? Yes, there is. The 1948 Genocide Convention. Any act that tries to destroy a religious or racial group is genocide. But has Israel signed this convention? Again, yes, it has. And when does the case begin? The first hearing is this month, on January 11th and 12th. And finally, the most important question: will it force Israel to end the war? I guess you know the answer already. It will not. Only 50% of the ICJ rulings result in compliance. In high-stakes cases, it's much lower. Like the Russia-Ukraine war, the ICJ asked Russia to stop the attacks on Ukraine. Moscow hasn't. In 2018, it asked the US to lift some sanctions on Iran. Again, Washington did not. So do not expect a ruling to change anything. Having said that, Israel did drop a surprise. Usually they ignore such lawsuits. They don't even bother turning up to fight them. But this time, Israel is game.
The State of Israel will appear before the International Court of Justice at The Hague to dispel South Africa's absurd blood libel. We have no doubt that after the Jewish state brings to justice the perpetrators of the bloodiest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, history will judge South Africa for abetting the modern heirs of the Nazis.
So Israel will fight it. But frankly, it's a risky decision. If you boycott the case and lose, no one cares. But if you fight and lose, people will care. It could leave Israel red-faced. Most of the Muslim nations have supported this lawsuit, but the US says it is without merit. We can expect a provisional ruling in a matter of weeks or months, but a final verdict could take years. That's the legal side of it. Now let's look at the politics. Why did South Africa, of all countries, file this case? Why not a West Asian country? Or a Muslim country or an Arab country? South Africa is none of these. So why sue Israel? There are three major reasons. One is common history. South Africa suffered under colonialism. Later on, black South Africans were treated as second-class citizens, that too in their own land. Does it sound familiar? To most Palestinians, it does. They say Israel has been doing the same to them. This shared history led to warm relations with South Africa. Anti-apartheid activists were close to Palestinian leaders. These two, especially. Nelson Mandela and Yasser Arafat. They met multiple times. They also shared a similar vision. Listen to what Mandela said back in 1990.
We identify with the PLO because just like ourselves, they are fighting for the right of self-determination.
And the sentiment is mutual. If you go to Ramallah in the West Bank, you will find Mandela Square. At the center is a statue of Nelson Mandela. The same ideology still rules both sides. Mandela's party is in power in South Africa. Arafat's PLO still controls the West Bank, hence the warmth. That's reason number one. Reason number two why South Africa decided to do this is a shared suspicion of the West. South Africa's apartheid regime was backed by the US and the UK, if not directly, then tacitly. They kept vetoing UN sanctions on South Africa. Again, does it sound familiar? It should, because the West is now doing the same with Israel. Many South Africans see Israel as a Western construct, a Western puppet in West Asia. So they sympathize with Palestine. And finally, reason number three why South Africa filed this case against Israel: pure politics. There are some 22 Arab countries in the world, including a couple in Northern Africa. But Israel is just one country. If you want loans or investments, Arab countries are a better bet. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that principles are not involved here. I'm saying it's not just about principles. Because the same South Africa has also ignored international courts. Like in 2015, when Sudanese dictator Omar al-Bashir visited the country, Bashir had an international criminal court warrant. But South Africa did not arrest him. Same in 2023. South Africa hosted the BRICS summit. President Putin of Russia was supposed to come. He too had an ICC warrant. But South Africa said, not a problem. As it turned out, Putin did not come, but you get the idea. Chances are this lawsuit will be the same. A lot of headlines, a lot of embarrassing moments perhaps. But in the end, no change on the ground. Israel's intelligence agencies operate on a motto: he who comes to kill you, rise up and kill him first. The quote comes from ancient Jewish writing, and it's very much part of the Israeli mindset. Until a few months ago, the Israeli security establishment had a reputation. There was a cult around agencies like Mossad for their targeted killings and skillful operations. That reputation was challenged on October 7th. Hamas caught them off guard. The Israelis were overwhelmed, even outmatched. In response, they waged a war. That war is still on. Israel says it has not decided when the combat operations will end. But somewhere in the shadows, fresh efforts are being made now. Israel has prepared a hit list of sorts. 3 top Hamas officials are on this list. They planned the October 7th attacks. Israel wants to eliminate them. And what are their names? Yahya Sinwar is right at the top, the leader of Hamas in Gaza and public enemy number 1 in Israel. He masterminded the October 7th attacks. In November 2023, Israel put a target on Sinwar's back. Israel's defense minister declared that Sinwar is living on borrowed time.
One thing is clear. Yahya Sinwar now has the IDF trackers above him, the Air Force bombs and the IDF's action. He will also meet our gunners soon.
Israel wants Sinwar at any cost. Israeli press compares him to Osama bin Laden. Israeli military has a profile of Sinwar. It describes him, and I'm quoting, as the butcher from Khan Yunus. Sinwar has been around for decades. Reports say he learned to speak Hebrew before shifting to politics. He built the military wing of Hamas. Sinwar is an important power center within the group. He forged Hamas's relations with the Arab powers. And during the recent ceasefire, when negotiations were underway, Sinwar was a key point of contact to discuss the release of hostages. The US declared him a global terrorist back in 2015. Recently, France and the UK sanctioned him. And Sinwar is supported by this man, Mohammed Deif, the second name on Israel's hit list. Officially, he is commander of the Al-Qasem brigades, the military wing of the Hamas. Israel says he's behind dozens of suicide bombings, also the October 7th attacks. It is believed that Deif and Sinwar were the 2 brains behind this operation. In fact, Deif is part of the inner circle. Just like Sinwar, he operates in secrecy. There are a lot of stories about him. Some say he does not use a smartphone and that he lost an eye in one of the attacks. He also has a nickname, the Guest, because he stays at a different location every day at the homes of different Hamas sympathizers to evade arrest. That's where the nickname comes from, the Guest. And Deif is responsible for building the tunnel network of Hamas and for improving the group's bomb-making skills. All this makes him an important target for Israel. Then comes his deputy, Marwan Issa, the second in command. He works as a coordinator between the military and the political wings of Hamas. He's called the shadow man, perhaps because he's the least known out of the lot. But he's an important player. He's responsible for planning many incursions into Israel, including the October 7th attacks. If the Israeli forces take out Sinwar and Deif, Marwan Issa will replace them. He will take charge. And there's a lot that ties these 3 men together. They were born in refugee families. They've spent time in Israeli prisons. And in the past, Israel has planned and launched operations to kill them. But they all managed to survive. Now, Israel is aiming at them again. They say they'll end the war only after neutralizing these threats. Israel wants these men dead or captured. In the last 3 months, they've had no success, but they haven't stopped trying.
이번 훈련을 통해 혹한에서도 최상의 전투 준비 태세를 유지한 가운데 적 도발 시 즉각 강력히 끝까지 응징할 수 있는 한미연합 결전 태세를 확립할 수 있었습니다.
2024년도 투쟁 방향에 대한 국가적인 행정경제 사업 체계와 질서를 강화하며 내각의
북남 관계와 통일 정책에 대한 입장을 새롭게 정립해야 할 절박한 요구를 제기하고 있습니다. 이제는 현실을 인정하고 남선 것들과의
Our next story is about TikTok. It's like the bad habit that the West cannot get rid of. They see the threats it poses, but they're hooked to it. TikTok has revolutionized short video formats, and now it wants to take on Amazon. That too on its home turf, America. TikTok is eyeing the e-commerce business, and they've set a big target for themselves, a business worth $17.5 billion in 2024, $17.5 billion this year. How will they do it? Through TikTok Shop. It's already available in parts of Asia and the UK. Recently, it was launched in America on the same app as TikTok. So you already have a ready-made user base, the same old TikTok app, just one difference. For e-commerce, you have an orange shop tag. And here's how it works. When you like something from a video or maybe a live, you click on the shop option. It takes you to an in-app storefront, and that's where you make your purchase. And that's their USP, the key differentiator, if you like. The ease of purchase. You remain in the same app. You don't have to leave to go to a different page. It makes the experience easier. And who makes money of it? Like any other marketplace, TikTok allows companies and small businesses to sell. Once a product is sold, TikTok gets a cut. Then there are creators. Anyone with 5,000 followers can sell products on TikTok. This is to make it look more natural, less targeted ads, and more of a person telling you what they like. Once the product sells, the creator gets a cut. TikTok gets a cut, and the company's products are sold, so obviously they make money. Basically, everyone's happy. So who's the loser? Perhaps the consumer. I'll explain why. TikTok became popular because of its algorithm. It is so effective, it's almost like it can read your brain. But the ads in between ruin the quintessential TikTok experience. Then there are scams. And TikTok Shop has plenty of those scams. Products that do not arrive, products that arrive but look nothing like what was promised. In 2023, TikTok Shop lost around $500 million. But that hasn't stopped them. Their parent company, ByteDance, is pouring billions into the e-commerce business. In 2024, it aims to grow this business tenfold. It wants to make it worth $17.5 billion this year, which begs the question, why does TikTok want this? Why e-commerce? Live e-commerce is not a new idea. Instagram tried it. It did not work. YouTube tried it in 2022. It was not a success. Even TikTok gave it a shot before. In the UK and Europe, it did not work. Apparently, the company thought of shutting it down. Then there's Southeast Asia. TikTok has a shopping feature there in Southeast Asia. This is where it gets most of its money. But it also has a lot of rivals like C's Shop, Alibaba's Lazada, and GoTo's Tokopedia. Plus, TikTok is banned in countries like India. So that's a loss of a huge market, which is why perhaps they're now eyeing America. And that means a direct competition with Amazon, because Amazon makes most of its money in the US. The US market makes up for 69.3% of Amazon's revenue. In 2022, Amazon made $514 billion. Now, TikTok wants a share of that money. But can it crack the US market? Amazon is all about reliability there. TikTok, on the other hand, is like placing a bet. Plus, Amazon is a dedicated marketplace. TikTok is a social media app that wants to be a marketplace. There's a big difference between the two. And then there are legal troubles. American lawmakers do not trust TikTok. They view it as a national security threat. Yet, some things work in TikTok's favor. The first is the creators. They can fuel its e-commerce initiative. They're influencers. The second is the young audience. 63% of US teens use TikTok. 1 in 5 are constantly on this app. TikTok can mold their shopping habits. And the third advantage is its viral nature. TikTok can make things go viral. And it's made a decent start. In November 2023, 5 million US consumers bought something on TikTok, 5 million customers. That cannot be good news for Amazon. TikTok has given some big players a run for their money. It changed the way we look at videos. Now we don't have to tilt our phones. But can it do the same for shopping? Guess we'll have to wait and see. Have you heard about the Epstein files? It's a bombshell. It's trending. The stuff of Hollywood blockbusters, politicians, film stars, a lot of money, sexual favors, and reputations at stake. Some 900 pages were unsealed today. The court website crashed. Such was the interest. These are documents linked to a man called Jeffrey Epstein, a financier and a convicted sex offender. He's dead now, and the names of people linked to him have come out. The list includes Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew, Michael Jackson, and Stephen Hawking. So what did they do? Some were accused of sexual misconduct, some just hung out with him, and some others were mentioned in passing. Here's a report.
In 2002, Jeffrey Epstein was asked about his famous friends. He didn't reveal names, but called them an investment. Epstein knew connections were important, so he made a lot of them. He called it a collection of sorts. Unsealed documents have now revealed that it wasn't just any other collection. It is an eclectic list of famous people. They had only two things in common. They were famous and they all knew Epstein. In the 2000s, Epstein was a big name. No one knew what he did, but they all knew he was wealthy, so they all wanted to be seen with him. On paper, Epstein was a financier, but behind closed doors, he was a sexual predator. In the early 2010s, he was accused of sexually abusing underage girls. In July 2019, he was arrested in New Jersey. He was charged with sex trafficking. If convicted, he would spend 45 years in prison. But by August, Epstein was dead. He died by suicide in a Manhattan jail. But the case didn't die with him. If anything, it just snowballed. Now, 5 years later, it's come back to haunt his closest friends. The names of over 100 people linked to Epstein have been made public. They were all mentioned in the lawsuit. At the time, they were kept secret by court order. But now they've been unsealed. The list is a mixed bag. There are names of people accused of wrongdoing, people who made accusations, and then those who were potential witnesses or maybe just hung out with him. All of those names are there. So let's take a look at the big ones. The first is Bill Clinton, the 42nd President of the United States. In the court documents, he's referred to as Doe 36. His name is mentioned a record 50 times. According to one victim, Epstein once told her that Bill Clinton likes his girls young. Clinton has obviously denied all this. But there are records of him using Epstein's planes even after he left the White House. He used it to travel to Bangkok and Paris. Then there's Prince Andrew. The UK royal was accused of sexual abuse by Virginia Giuffre. In 2022, he reached an out-of-court settlement with her. He still denies the allegations. He's been stripped of his royal duties. These documents reveal details of the infamous prince's alleged abuse. Another survivor apart from Giuffre has claimed that Andrew groped her. There's also a mention of Stephen Hawking. Epstein talked about him in an email. Apparently, there was a claim. It was about the scientist taking part in an underage orgy. Epstein wanted to pay to prove that the allegations were false. There were many others. They were all mentioned in passing. Epstein talked about being on phone with them. There are so far no claims of any abuse against them. The list includes pop star Michael Jackson, actor Kevin Spacey, magician David Copperfield, Nobel laureate Lawrence Krauss, actor Leonardo DiCaprio, and model Naomi Campbell. More documents will be unsealed in the coming days, so PR teams have already gone into damage control mode. There was a time when almost everyone famous wanted to be friends with Epstein. Now, they can't run away from the association fast enough. Epstein may be dead, but he seems to be haunting his so-called old friends.
We're counting down to elections in Taiwan. Voting is on January 13th. I'm sure people in Taiwan are excited for it. But guess who is not? Who else but China? Beijing is busy sending spy balloons over Taiwan. It is now a daily affair. 1 balloon on Monday, 3 on Tuesday, and 3 more on Wednesday. Some of these balloons flew right over Taiwan. The question is why? China usually calls them weather balloons, but this time they haven't even released a statement. Meanwhile, Taiwan is on alert. They're expecting some sort of provocation during the election. Which brings us to the vote itself. Who are the contenders? One is Vice President Lai Ching-te. He represents the ruling DPP, the Anti-China Democratic Progressive Party, DPP. His opponent is Hu Yu-yi. He is the mayor of the new Taipei city and represents the opposition, the Kuomintang. Officially, both parties prefer the status quo. And what does that mean? Taiwan remains an independent island. At the same time, there is no formal declaration of independence. But the status quo means different things for different parties, for both these parties, both sides. For DPP, it also means closer ties to the US. For Kuomintang, it means a reset with China. Not reunification, but a reset. The recent vice presidential debate sums up this difference. Listen to this.
China's defense budget is 17 times that of ours. No matter if we increase our budget to 2.5% or 3.5% or 5% or even 50% of the national GDP, it will be hard to compete with them.
The whole world knows that the cause of the tension across the Taiwan Strait is the Communist Party of China.
One says we can't compete with China, the other says China is the problem. And who's leading? Most polls put the DPP ahead. And if they win, it could shake things up. You see, Taiwan held its first general elections in 1996. Since then, power always alternates. No party has won 3 consecutive terms. But the DPP could do that. It's a clear sign that Taiwan wants a new status quo, a more confident policy. It's something that the outgoing president talked about.
We have won the trust of the international community with unparalleled credibility and deepened cooperation with our democratic partners, allowing us to face the world confidently and firmly, and to face China confidently and calmly.
Of course, China will be livid. When the DPP won in 2016, they broke off diplomatic relations. Imagine if they win again in 2024. Beijing will most likely throw a tantrum. They've tried hard to influence the election. We've seen military build-ups, threats of economic sanctions, even junkets for Taiwanese officials. Taipei has been tracking China's attempts to meddle in the elections. They say a report will be published after the vote. It should be an interesting read. Now, China's attempts have not changed much on the ground, but Taiwan is not taking chances. They've issued new curbs on Chinese reporters. Those from the mainland can only observe. No article, no smear pieces for state media. Just come, observe and go. Also, no Chinese academics will observe the elections, which is a break from tradition. Usually, academics from the mainland do visit around election time, but this time they will not. And it's not clear which side decided to stop it. But it does tell you about the level of distrust. A DPP victory will not change anything overnight. Both China and the West know this. So the fear is not that Taiwan's formal independence is closer, because it's not. The fear is that reunification is getting farther. As complicated as that sounds, those are two different things. From geopolitical uncertainty, let's go to financial uncertainty. Let's talk about cryptocurrencies. Their values tanked yesterday. The first crypto crash of 2024. Hundreds of millions of dollars in market value were wiped out in just a few hours. Before this, most cryptocurrencies were on the rise. Most had made gains throughout 2023. That streak seems to have ended yesterday. It looks like crypto volatility is back. But what is causing it? What does it mean for you? And should you think about investing in crypto? Our next report has the answers.
There's an old saying, the greater the risk, the greater the reward. These days, nothing quite epitomizes this like crypto. Cryptocurrencies are the new casino games where people try and make their fortunes. The oldest and arguably best known cryptocurrency is Bitcoin. It was launched about 15 years ago. But yesterday, Bitcoin and all its younger clones reminded the world that they are still active and volatile. We saw the first big crypto crash of the year on Wednesday, and the year has barely begun. Crypto values across the board tanked. About $600 million in crypto went up in smoke in just a few hours. This was due to one report about Bitcoin spot exchange traded funds, or ETFs. It's something like a Bitcoin mutual fund. For months, there were rumors that these would be made legal in the US. The final decision is expected next week. But yesterday, a report said that these Bitcoin funds could get delayed by a few months, and that caused the market to crash. This highlights the volatility of cryptocurrencies. Before this, cryptocurrency values had been rising steadily. On the 1st of January, Bitcoin was at a 21-month peak. Its value had crossed $45,000. Now it's trading slightly lower, but nowhere near its bottom value seen in the last few months. Next week could see cryptocurrencies across the board rise again. It depends on how the US chooses to deal with them. So it raises the question, should one invest in something as volatile as crypto? That is, of course, best answered by a financial professional, one who understands your individual situation. Because there's no one-size-fits-all answer. Crypto has made some people enormously wealthy, but many have lost their life savings as well. One thing for sure is that crypto is volatile. Investing in it is akin to gambling, and you should never gamble with more than you're willing to lose. Of course, this is if you're allowed to gamble at all. Some countries like India don't officially allow crypto trading, and that should have been that for Indian investors. But it hasn't worked out that way. Indian investors have been trading on foreign exchanges, away from the scrutiny of Indian financial market regulators. And of course, the regulators aren't happy. So last week, India began banning what it calls illegal foreign exchanges. Some of the bigger ones like Binance and Kraken are on the list. Their URLs will soon be unavailable, and more exchanges will meet this fate until proper regulations are brought in. Cryptocurrencies are still a relatively new investment medium. Countries around the world have yet to figure out how to rein crypto in. Until they do, the risks will always be high. It's up to you to decide if the potential reward is worth it.
Now let's turn our attention to travel. What's one of the worst parts of international trips? For many in the global south, it's the paperwork. You need to plan a trip months in advance, make all your bookings, then apply for the dreaded visa, your itinerary is scrutinized, you're asked to chart out your destinations. In short, it is an ordeal. But of late, things are looking up. Countries are still recovering from the Wuhan virus pandemic. They're trying to revive their tourism industry, and many have decided to relax visa rules. China and Thailand, for instance, they just announced mutual visa-free travel from March. Thailand has also removed visa requirements for Indians temporarily. And this is becoming a bit of a trend. Countries in the global south are embracing visa-free regimes. Could this be the future of international travel? No visas. Here's our report.
There was some big travel news out of Thailand this week. It has struck a deal with one of its biggest tourist providers, China. Bangkok and Beijing have announced an end to visas. Starting this March, citizens from both countries won't need to apply for visas to go to the other nation. No e-visas, no visas on arrival, nothing. Just seamless travel. And this news is being hailed by people in the tourism industry.
Search volume for flights from Shanghai to Bangkok and Beijing to Bangkok has been increased by more than 40% instantly. From January 2 to the Spring Festival, the number of travel orders from China to Thailand increased year on year more than 10 times compared with 2023.
Now, this isn't just about better cross-border relations, it's mostly just business. Before the pandemic, China contributed about 11 million tourists to Thailand. That number has been in a free fall for a while now. In 2022, the number barely crossed 250,000, so it was time for desperate measures. Thailand first announced a temporary visa waiver last September. It was a one-way deal. China didn't reciprocate. until the scheme showed success. There was a surge in Chinese travelers to Thailand after the waiver. Seeing this, China got on board, and now citizens of both nations are free to travel to the other visa-free. While Bangkok is eyeing Chinese tourists, Thailand isn't the only nation that Beijing is targeting. In November, China removed visa requirements for people from 6 nations: France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Spain, and Malaysia. Malaysia is the only one from the global south, and visitors from there have become a welcome sight for China's tourism industry.
Since 1st December, the number of travelers entering China from countries that enjoy the visa-free policy at Shenzhen airport has exceeded by 20,000, with a month-on-month growth of over 20%. The number of people entering from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia alone has jumped by nearly 30%.
Tourists from the global south are bringing in much-needed money. They are helping revive a tourism sector battered by COVID. So it's only natural to try and make it easier for travelers to enter the country. Indians are also much sought after. They can travel visa-free to Thailand. Malaysia too is allowing visa-free travel to Indians. So are Sri Lanka and Vietnam. And this will likely lead to a lot of benefits. Tourism will of course thrive. It has been since the Southeast Asian nations opened up to India. Visa-free travel helps people pull off spur-of-the-moment trips. Nothing quite like squeezing in a beach trip between 2 hectic work weeks. But these aren't permanent arrangements for Indian travellers just as yet. The exemptions will expire in a few months. But as the Thailand-China case shows, if it's economically viable, countries may open borders permanently. The global south can help itself with these visa exemptions. It can spread the wealth and spur growth. Visa-free travel could well be the norm in the near future. It doesn't just satisfy your wanderlust, it's also good for business.
Sneezing with your eyes open, licking your elbow, tickling yourself. These few things are near impossible for humans to do. For about 4 decades, beating the game of Tetris was part of this list. That is, until now. Tetris has finally met its match in a teenager, a 13-year-old prodigy from Oklahoma, Willis Gibson. He started playing the game when he was 11, and now he has beaten the so-called endless game. How did he do it? I'll get to that, but first a primer on Tetris. It's a hugely popular game, a classic if you will. It was designed in 1984 by a Soviet engineer, then picked up by Nintendo, a gaming company, in 1989. Soon it became a worldwide sensation. Today there are over 200 variants of the game. It's a world record. Tetris mobile version has sold more than 100 million times, making it the 3rd best-selling video game of all time. In an era where video games offer cinematic visuals, plot lines and thousands of characters, Tetris has managed to stay relevant, ironically, thanks to its simplicity. And here's how it works. The user has to manipulate falling blocks and fit the varying shapes together to create solid rows. It sounds easy enough, but it's just as difficult. And that is the power of Tetris. Its simplicity draws you in. But as the level goes up, the blocks fall faster. Eventually, the speed shoots up dramatically and the player is overwhelmed. They lose. Tetris wins. The usual. For decades, winning Tetris was considered humanly impossible. Only artificial intelligence has ever beaten Tetris. So how did a teenager achieve this dizzying feat? See for it yourself.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Yes! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Gibson played the game for 38 minutes. He reached level 157 of the game. At this point, kill screen happened, meaning the screen froze and the game crashed. This is the point where the video game becomes unplayable due to limitations in its coding. You see, Tetris was not designed to be won. So when a player achieves scores that are so high, the game's memory bank overloads. In Gibson's game 2, you can see how the level reader is glitching from numbers to alphabets. It's because the code was not designed to advance so high. When the computer simply cannot continue, victory comes. Now the screen says 18, but that's level 157, and Gibson is the first human being to reach it. The achievement is massive, but its importance goes beyond the realm of arcade games. To give you context, Tetris is not just a game, it's a community. There are thousands of players dedicated to Tetris. There are international championships for it. So Gibson did not just play a game, he joined a living tradition. Until a few years ago, players believed it was only possible to play up to level 29. In 2011, that record broke, and players started reaching higher. They developed new techniques like hyper tapping and rolling, basically creative ways of rapidly tapping fingers and rolling the controller. And this is not just about gaming, it's a lesson in learning, in extending human performance. Scientists call this social learning a cultural evolution, and it's everywhere. Take the Olympic Games. In 1968, Dick Fosbury won the gold in high jumping. He jumped 7 feet and 4.19 inches using his Fosbury flop technique. No other competitor could pull it off then. But by the 2020 Olympics, every single competitor used the flop technique because they all had learnt it. Then they smashed Fosbury's record. What Fosbury did for high jumping, artificial intelligence and internet are doing now for every skill out there. The fear is that AI will make human skills obsolete. Well, it might, but the opposite could also be true. AI and internet can fuel skill learning. Today, it is easier than ever to learn something new, and humans as a species are defined by their ability to learn. Gibson's case is a landmark one, but it should collectively inspire us to push our boundaries, to extend our grasp and build our blocks towards victory, even if it's in Tetris.
얘기할 필요가 있습니다.
경야는 최고 용도자 동측에서는 문재인 손잡고 북과 남을 자유롭게 오가시며 금단의 선 분단의 벽을 문재인 대통령은 오늘과
대남 대적 부문의 기교들을 폐지 및 정리하고 근본적인 투쟁 원칙과 방향을 전환할 때 대하여 제시하신 과업을 철저히 관철하기 위해서 1월 1일 조선민주주의민공화국 외무상 최선희 동지가 해당 관계부문 일꾼들과 협의를 진행했습니다.
경야는 최고 용도자에서 로조 친선의 역사와 전통을 계승 발전시키려는 로된 것을 대단히 기쁘게 생각한다고 하시면서 이번 상공이
잘못된 정책으로 하여 금강산이 10여 년간 경의하는 최고 용도자 동지께서는 금강산 관광
큰 복 받으시고 소망하는 모든 일들이 정부는 자유민주적 기본질서에 입각한 평화적 통일이라는 원칙을 일관되게 추진해 나갈 것입니다.
에게 핵을 사용할 때는 이런 측면도 다 감안해가지고 외무성에 이 통전부 이런 모든 대남기구를 흡수 통합했다는 측면을 볼 때 아마 남북관계를 북미관계의 하위 개념으로 보고 있는 것이 아닌가.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi went snorkeling in Lakshadweep. He called it an exhilarating experience. In Las Vegas, a judge was violently attacked by a felon during a courtroom hearing, and a South Korean zoo unveils baby panda twins before their public debut to zoo visitors. Finally, we are taking you back in history. On this day in 1948, Myanmar became an independent country. It was a British colony from the late 19th century. Britain's exit was negotiated by Prime Minister Clement Attlee and Burmese leader Aung San. Leaving you on that note, thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Good evening. You're watching Breaking on News 18 with me, Akanksha Swaroop. We dive into the segment with the latest coming in from the Ministry of External Affairs.